There's a particular kind of comfort that lives between your own walls. Not the comfort of laziness, but the comfort that anchors you. It's that moment when you close the door behind you and feel your shoulders drop in a way they never do anywhere else. Like your body finally remembers it doesn't have to defend itself. It's not hiding, it's homecoming. Most people won't get it. They see someone who prefers their couch to a crowded bar and think something must be broken. But here's what they miss. For some people, home isn't where they retreat when life gets too hard. It's where life finally gets to be real. Because outside, in the theater of constant impression management, they lose the plot. Inside, they remember their lines. Maybe it began early. The playground, the cafeteria, the locker room. Spaces designed for volume and velocity. For some children, those environments felt like being dropped into cold water. You had to shout to exist, perform to belong, mirror others just to survive. So they learned to build something quieter, a parallel universe where gentleness wasn't weakness. That's when home stopped being just a location. It became a philosophy. Research shows that people who gravitate toward home often have sensory processing sensitivity. Their nervous systems amplify the world. Fluorescent lights buzz louder, conversations overlap into chaos. So the stillness of home isn't retreat, it's recalibration. It's their biology saying, here, I can finally stop bracing. But it goes deeper. Home is where the performance ends. The curated self, the one that knows how to navigate small talk, when to nod, how to laugh at jokes that aren't funny, that version gets to rest. What remains is the unedited draft, the self that doesn't need approval because no one's watching. Isn't it curious? A person can spend hours surrounded by others and feel completely transparent. But the moment they're alone, sitting in their favorite chair with nothing but silence, they finally feel seen. That's not loneliness. That's intimacy with the one person they've been ignoring all day, themselves. Our culture worships the extroverted ideal. We celebrate the ones who are always available, always connected, always producing content. We've made busyness a status symbol and stillness a confession of failure. But there's quiet defiance in those who've learned that peace doesn't require an audience. Sometimes meaning lives in the margins, not the headlines. For people who love their homes, solitude isn't deprivation. It's restoration. It's how they untangle their thoughts, metabolize their emotions, and remember what matters beneath all the noise. When you're constantly performing for others, your identity fractures into versions. But alone, you're accountable only to truth. There's a delicate balance between sanctuary and prison. Even homebodies need human connection. But here's what's misunderstood. People who love staying home often cultivate deeper bonds, not weaker ones. They don't scatter their energy across shallow interactions. They save it for conversations that leave marks, for friendships where silence isn't awkward. Psychological studies reveal something remarkable. People who embrace intentional alone time demonstrate higher self-awareness and creative problem-solving. Not because isolation makes them smarter, but because stillness makes them attentive. They don't just experience emotions, they study them. In that quiet laboratory of the self, insight crystallizes. Think about your own moments of clarity. They rarely arrive during stimulation. They come in the shower, late at night, during a silent morning with coffee steaming in your hands. That's what staying home offers, space for your mind to speak without competing for attention. The deepest truths whisper, they don't shout. Yet many homebodies carry invisible shame. They scroll through feeds filled with adventure and assume they're failing at life. Social media has turned existence into a spectator sport. But what those curated moments never show is the exhaustion behind the smile, the hollow feeling of being surrounded yet unseen. Everyone's searching for groundedness. Some just discover it looks like staying put. There's profound humanity in needing refuge. Throughout history, mystics retreated to deserts. Philosophers walked alone through forests. Writers locked themselves in rooms for months. Today's version is smaller, but no less sacred. A bedroom with soft lighting, a corner with books stacked like possibilities. The impulse hasn't changed, only the geography. Here's the neuroscience. When you're home, your brain enters safe mode. Cortisol levels decrease. Your nervous system shifts from arousal to rest. Your body stops preparing for threat. That's why emotions surface when you're alone. Your defenses finally lower. and everything you've been postponing rises to meet you. It's not weakness, it's thawing. But people will judge. They'll say you're wasting time, missing opportunities. What they don't understand is that staying home doesn't mean staying still. Some of the most radical transformations happen in private. Reading that changes your worldview, writing that clarifies your purpose, thinking that reorganizes your priorities. These are revolutions no one photographs. Homebodies aren't avoiding the world, they're digesting it. There's also relief in predictability. The brain craves patterns because they reduce cognitive load. For someone who loves home, this predictability is sacred. Every small routine becomes a message to your nervous system. You're safe. You can rest now. In a world demanding constant productivity, that stillness becomes radical. People who love staying home quietly resist the equation that worth equals output. They demonstrate that significance doesn't always require motion. Sometimes it emerges from being still enough to notice how shadows change throughout the day. And perhaps that's why homebodies often possess such rich interior worlds. When you spend enough time in your own company, imagination moves in. You begin noticing what others rush past, the way steam rises from coffee, how silence has texture, the poetry of rain against glass. There's quiet beauty everywhere once you stop moving fast enough to miss it. You can read someone's inner life in how they shape their space. Some fill their homes with plants reaching toward light. Others surround themselves with books, like conversations waiting to happen. Within those walls, they're building worlds more honest than any they inhabit outside. When you study solitude and creativity, you find this truth. Isolation allows your authentic voice to emerge. Surrounded by others, you think in borrowed language. But alone, your mind unfolds in its native dialect. That's where originality lives, in the unobserved moments when you're accountable only to your own truth. Many great minds craved solitude, not because they despised humanity, but because they needed silence to hear themselves think. We all need that room of our own where we can exist without justification. People who love staying home have discovered something essential. The outside world doesn't define their worth. When you spend enough time with yourself, really with yourself, you stop seeking permission to exist. You build a foundation that external circumstances can't shake. Still, solitude can be confronting. When distractions fade, uncomfortable truths emerge. But those who embrace that discomfort learn something powerful. Peace isn't the absence of difficulty. It's the willingness to face it without running. Psychology teaches that comfort with your own company indicates emotional maturity. People who enjoy solitude have stronger self-concepts. They're less vulnerable to peer pressure, more aligned with internal values. When you've spent time in silence, you learn to distinguish your own voice from others. That's how wisdom grows quietly. Of course, homebodies experience loneliness too, but their loneliness has depth. It's the longing for connection that feels authentic. They'd rather have solitude than superficial company. And when they find their people, they love with intention because they understand the currency of attention. Sometimes people fall in love with home not from peace, but from exhaustion. Exhausted from translating themselves for a world that doesn't speak their language. For them, home is the only place they don't have to pretend. It's not escape, it's exhale. Psychologists call this social decompression. When you've spent hours managing how others perceive you, coming home feels like finally setting down weight. That immediate need to do nothing isn't laziness, it's recovery. The more you understand this, the clearer it becomes. Staying home isn't just preference, it's temperament. Some people are wired for external stimulation. Others are wired for introspection. Neither is superior. They're simply different frequencies of being human. But because our culture celebrates constant motion, the quieter ones often feel defective. They're not. They're just tuned differently. And the world needs both. The ones who create momentum and the ones who create meaning. The performers and the witnesses. Often it's the listeners who help us understand what all the noise means. So if you're someone who loves staying home, release the guilt. Don't let anyone convince you that your peace is apathy or your comfort is cowardice. You're not missing life. You're living it at a different tempo. You're doing the internal work most people are too distracted to attempt. And that work, invisible as it seems, shapes everything else. Because when the world grows chaotic, it's often the quiet ones who've already found meaning. Not in spectacle or status, but in the gentle rhythm of ordinary moments. The warmth of familiar spaces, the luxury of uninterrupted thought. And perhaps that's the real truth. Home isn't just four walls. It's peace you've earned through self-knowledge. It's sanctuary built from patience, presence, and the courage to be still. It's where you meet yourself again and again until one day you realize you were never really running from the world. You were just finding your way back to yourself.